Hello and welcome back to the Giant Pod with me, Andy Rintmore. This is part 2 of a 2-part podcast with drumming extraordinaire Robert Bryan. This is actually the first hour of our conversation before we did the podcast that you've probably or hopefully already heard, which is part 1. In this one, we basically just gush about the Beatles for an hour and various other parts of our record collection. We enjoyed it so much, being big Beatles fans here at the Giant Pod, that we thought it would be fun to release it as a sort of a bonus podcast special. Lots of Anoraki Beatles facts and discussions in this, and I'm sure all you big Beatle fans out there are going to love it. Big thanks again to Robert Bryan for basically putting in about 4 hours with me for these 2 podcasts. So shout out to Rob. But yeah, before I waffle on too much, let's get you guys into the Giant Pod big bonus Beatles bonanza, whatever we're going to call it. Here you go.
Day and John Coltrane, which I just love. Home is where the hatred is. Yeah, man. When you are who you are, I think I'll call it morning. Pieces of a Man, Sign of the Ages, All Down You Fall, The Needle's Eye, and The Prisoner. It's a really heavy album, as you can tell from the titles, but it's a classic, man. Yeah. Absolute classic.
I love it. And I also love that Sgt. Pepper drum head that you've got behind you there. Hey, is that an original Hard Day's Night? What's going on?
Well, do you know what? I mean, I found this because I've got a load of vinyl here, and I've got loads more at my mum's place, which at some point I will bring over here at some point.
Yeah.
But this is I must have been about 10 or 11, and I said to my parents, I want the Hard Day's Night album, because John Lennon had died the year before. Let's say it was 81, so I was 11. So John Lennon was shot in 80. The night he was shot, Nationwide, I think, was the news programme. All that was all about it. And then BBC One cancelled their viewing for the night, and they put on film, Help, and like a documentary or something. So, of course, I'm sat there thinking, these are just like the Monkees. You know, this is crazy, because Monkees was being repeated on Multicoloured Swap Shop.
Right.
And I used to go between Swap Shop and Tiswas on a Saturday morning because I like both. So I used to flick over both channels because I like both. Right. I like the anarchic thing of Tiswas, but I liked all the giveaways and stuff on, and the guests, because Gary Newman and Kate Bush would be on. But imagine they were on Tiswas too. But anyway, so I said to my parents, look, I'm really into the Beatles now. I really like them and I get it. And they were like, yeah, the Beatles are the band, and that's where the Monkees were taking off and all that. Anyway, so they were playing all these songs, and something about the song A Hard Day's Night, I felt like I'd heard it before when I saw the newscast the year before. And of course, I went out to buy Help after I saw the film, but that song stuck in my head. And I remember saying to my mum when it's on the radio, what is this? And she had this Hard Day's Night. I said, right, I need the Hard Day's Night album, guys. You know, that's my next thing. So Dad in Bath went in his lunch hour, went to the shop called Rival, which was an old record shop in the corridor opposite the Guildhall, which is a funky little corridor full of all cool shops. And I was expected to come back with the other one. I've got the other one somewhere, you know, with all the faces, the black and white pictures.
Yeah.
And he came back with this, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And I looked a bit disappointed, I think.
Right.
But it's the American version, but it's a reissue. So I think it's a 70s reissue of the American album, which has only the original songs in the film, none of the other stuff, like You Can't Do That the other English version had, and Any Time at All and all that. And it's got the George Martin Orchestra playing excerpts with his orchestra that was in the film.
Oh, wow.
Like there's the instrumental version of This Boy on here, a jazzy version of A Hard Day's Night when they're running away from the kids, and Can't Buy Me Love. And it's just really cool. And there's a version on here of I'll Cry Instead, which is also on the original UK version, but this version's a few minutes longer with an extra verse, which is weird. And they did this a lot, because if you listen to Rubber Soul, at the start of not I'm Looking Through You, or is it I'm Looking Through You?
I love that song.
I'm forgetting now, but one of them, there's a false start. It goes a ring digger, because apparently reading about it, George Martin, they were nagging them, Capitol, to send the tapes. So they used to send tapes that were sort of almost not half finished, but not edited properly.
What?
So that's why the American versions before Sgt. Pepper are all cool, because they've got different lengths of, like, some of the tracks go on slightly. I know we're real nerds now,
right?
But some of the tracks go on slightly longer on the American versions than the English versions and stuff like that.
I need
weird little things. I've got, and when I was in, I don't know where it is now, but when I was in on tour with Lorena last year or the year before, I picked up a copy of Revolver, which was it's around somewhere, but it's a version that's mono, but it's one of the versions that they had to send back, because there was a Rubber Soul version they had to send back, and there's a Revolver which is all out of whack. Again. Right. It's Parlophone. It went out, but it's the mix is like, you put on Taxman, it's all normal. Then the guitar solo comes on, it's like, whoa!
Right.
And Tomorrow Never Knows is a completely different mix, completely different.
Oh wow!
It was.
Yeah. I he's for the listener, he's mouthing this, so his wife doesn't.
It was but I had to do it because it's my favorite Beatles record, so I had to have it, and it was I mean, I just handed over the plastic and it was mine. Yeah. But that shop, it was in what did I just say? Vienna. Yeah, it was in Vienna. And Florence. Sorry, it was in Florence. And they had this shop. Seriously, I could have spent a fortune. They'd have records that they didn't want you to touch up slightly higher. There was not one CD in the shop.
Right.
It was completely vinyl. And they had all these Jimi Hendrix, Doors, all the things, Miles Davis, all the things that I'd love to pass my cash over the till for, into the till. I was like, oh my God. And they had a Yesterday and Today in there as well.
Right.
Which was the Butcher cover, which was...
Right.
I couldn't go that far. I don't think I could have got away with that one.
Right.
But there was one in there, and I almost wanted to ask, could I touch it? But it said, like, you can't even get it down to look at.
Don't even look at it.
Don't even look at it. You'll be fined, Kind
of reminds me of the guy from The Simpsons in the comic book store.
Oh, yes.
Don't even look at it.
Yeah. I'd forgotten that. It was exactly like that.
Yeah.
But when I was out on the road, I always used to, like, because, after a while, you don't mind hanging with the band, but sometimes you don't want to hang with the band and you want to just do your own thing.
Yeah.
Because you're together 24/7. So I used to look for the local record shops, real nerd, wherever I am in the world, and I will do it again one day, hopefully, and just go to the record stores. Not always buying, but a lot of the times I'd end up buying. And it was just great to find things like that. I wish I had it now, but I don't know where it is. It's around somewhere. But I know this isn't a visual thing, so it doesn't really matter anyway. But I could just tell you it's a very, very rare pressing of Revolver.
That's amazing. I'll tell you, I'll let you in on a little something as well. My Beatles fandom, it may not be on your level there, but I did spend 40 quid on professionally pressed Japanese bootlegs of the Rock Band video game mixes.
Oh, that would be cool, man. Really?
I can send you those if you want them.
Let's get sharing.
They're not... I don't know. I'd like to know what you think about hearing them. What annoyed me with their 2009 remasters, and now I think they're rectifying it with those gorgeous 50th anniversary reissues.
Yes.
Was that trying to, I put headphones on and they're just remasters of the, I think, inferior 80s stereo mixes. And Ringo is hard left for a lot of it. Man. As much as I love him, it really batters you around the head, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like a bunch of bumblebees in your left ear.
Yeah.
You obviously, I don't know if you know the story, but when John Lennon heard the original stereo mixes, which I guess pretty much were until the 80s, still the same mixes of the stereo, he went early 70s, I think this was, 72, 73. And of course, he pretended, I guess, not to worry too much because he'd moved on. But I think he was still very, very proud of the band and a little bit kind of cagey about what people would say about it and stuff. And anyway, someone passed him these records. Maybe EMI sent them to him. Who knows? And it's on YouTube, and he's absolutely going mental, saying, that they've softened the band up, the way they've put me and Paul over here and George and Ringo this side. And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I grew up listening to those mixes. And, you know, I used to pan left and think, oh, I can hear Ringo. Pan right, there's the voices. Like, maybe I could play along. But of course you can until the voices stop and the instruments start again. Then you can't hear anything. So maybe it's a good click practice, maybe, even though they weren't done to click. But, you know, and it was just frustrating. And I could see what he means because I bought the... on CD, I bought the mono 7 or 8 the first Beatle album reprints
the
on
white
Capitol.
box.
Yeah, I didn't buy the box. I bought them individually.
Right.
I wish I had. Maybe one day, again, when I can, I'll buy them. But it's great because you get the mono mix of the album. And then if you leave it in the car long enough and you're driving a long way, you get the stereo version of the album.
Yeah.
and it was just like he said, you got to hear us in mono because we were a tougher band than these stereo mixes give us. They make us sound too sweet.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's right because you listen, as you know, you listen to those mono mixes because I remember we spoke about this ages ago. They're really tough, and the same with the Stones ones as well. They just present differently, and it's a lot harsher. It's like you're in the room when you're listening to it. You're in a gig. The stereo thing just makes it go, oh, this is nice. Let's separate this badly, and it's just rubbish. The you know, again, listening to Revolver in mono, forgetting the one I've got, which is great, but listening to that the Capitol album on mono, and then you put I think I'm only sleeping or whatever it might be. I asked yesterday and today, but whatever, and he forwarded it to the next one. The stereo version, it's like, oh, really? Like if I needed someone on Rubber Soul was a classic. I listened to the mono and it was just like in your face. It was like 12-string guitars, beautiful Rickenbackers. You go forward it to the stereo version, and all of a sudden it goes like this, and it's all kind of lost. And it's like,
it thins it out.
Absolutely, man. It loses the aggression.
Yeah,
which
someone said to me once: the Beatles in mono are a rock and roll band, the Beatles in stereo are a pop band.
I agree with that. You know, for any Beatle haters, I think that they can listen to those stereo mixes and go, "Oh, listen to this." But you lay the same album on them in mono, and they're like, "Okay, this is interesting. This is interesting." It's got grit. The little things like his hi hats rocking together. We know we're drummers, right? We know he's playing loud. You hear that snare drum cracking, but when it's in stereo, it's kind of just switched over there somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
But in mono, it's at you. It's like in your face, and the bass is with it, and it's just like, whoa, okay, now I can take you seriously. You know, you listen to things like, not necessarily my favourite records, but the early ones like Please Please Me, not so much, but with the Beatles and Hard Day's Night, they're really coming at you. When they start doing I Want to Be Your Man, it's like, yes, I get it now. I get the R&B sort of influence, the rock influence, I get it.
Yeah. Oh, mate, it's fantastic. I love the Beatles so much, and Harry, my producer, he loves a good Beatles chat. So I'm glad we've got this in the bag because I think he's going to enjoy editing this.
I mean, I know some people don't, and that's totally cool. You know, everyone, it's subjective, isn't it? And but I was thinking today when I was just sort of pottering around here, you know, in between homeschooling and stuff. That, you know, when they come up, you know, I always get a bit defensive, but then it's according what sort of things people say about them. If it's just nonsense like they're rubbish or they're, you know, they're shite or something, you know, you think, well, why? Give me a reason. I don't mind. Of course you can say that, and maybe they are. Who knows? But I really like them, and music history says they were okay. So you tell me why. And it's just so funny when you hear some sort of, especially when you're my age, because I grew up in that 80s period where I was listening to them because obviously when he died, we all sort of knew about it, and I would still listen to Frankie Goes to Hollywood and all the stuff I was listening to, but I still had real appreciation for the Beatles. But I realised that a lot of my friends' dads grew up in that period.
Yeah.
So, of course, they've still got hatred because they tried to date girls that didn't love the Beatles and wouldn't go out with them. So they all like the Stones because they're like, well, we don't like the Beatles, they're for girls. And this divide, this sort of like weird kind of vibe went up through the generation. So a lot of my friends at school, I would realise, it got to the point when I was older, I'd say, like, I don't know, Dave, did your dad like the Beatles? No, he hated them. Oh, that's why you don't like them. I get it now.
Right.
It's kind of, and you could say this about, unfortunately, racism and politics. It all gets handed down, you know, good, bad, or ugly. Yeah. And certainly for my generation, the Beatles thing was one of those. You could say, yeah, your dad liked the Stones, right? And you go, yeah, well, I can see why he's ugly. But it's just it. That's just it. Now it's not the same. It's moved well on from there, obviously.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, it was very much that. You know, Dad would be really, I hated them. Yeah. And it's just like, really? Okay. Fair enough.
I did. I guested on a podcast a few weeks back called "The Biggest I Ever Had," which is naughty sounding. But it is actually.
I didn't want to say it, but it does sound a bit rude.
Yes.
Ooh, Mrs.
Who are? I had Kenneth Williams in my head then.
Matron, I'm a massive Carry On fan. Don't start me on that.
Go get you started there then. What was I going to say? So they asked me on because their concept for this podcast is it's the 25 biggest singles in the UK chart history. And they said, Andy, do you want to talk about a Madonna or whatever it was track, J-Lo or so, I don't know who it was, or do you want to talk about, they gave me two options. It's Beatles, She Loves You, or something else. And I was like, dude, just get me on the Beatles one. and in the Beatles one, I said it's like, when people say, I don't trust anyone that doesn't like dogs.
I've seen this.
Right.
Yeah,
so when people say to me, I don't like the Beatles, like that's my response. It's the same response.
There used to be a thing on Facebook. It was like a chalkboard with it. Don't trust anyone who doesn't love the Beatles or like the Beatles type thing. And there is something in that. I just find it really sort of mesmerizing. I find it really perplexing when a musician, especially, is really anti, and quite heavy. And again, I'll just be cool about it. I say, okay, but why? Just tell me why, And I can't stand a band that just did She Loves You and Yellow Submarine. And I'm like, dude, like what? And I'll sort of, I'll just leave it at that most of the time. I'm not I don't go around with like a Beatle Bible bashing it, but at the same time, I think I said on that DW playlist last week I did or whatever, that sometimes for real haters, I say, look, cool, I'm going to play you one track and it's only 2.5 minutes, but I'm going to play this to you and that's it. I'm done. I don't have to try and tell you to, love them. It's not my job in life, and maybe you're better off not knowing them. And again, I've just put on Tomorrow Never Knows, right? Because I know that's the one that's going to make them go. And one of the reactions was somebody once said, that's the Chemical Brothers. And I went, it's not. It's just the Beatles. You see, but Chemical Brothers used that rhythm. I said, well, they did with that Noel Gallagher when they did that track. Can't think what that's called now. But and I do that, or Helter Skelter or something, and they go, this isn't the Beatles. And I go, yeah, it is. Yeah. Or Everyone's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey. And they go, this isn't the Beatles. I go, yes, it is the Beatles. They were just multifaceted. Yes, they had the pretty songs, the love songs. They had heavy songs. Here you go. They had futuristic songs. They had all the tape bleep weirdness. It's all there if you want to find it. Yeah. And for me, like I've probably said and documented loads of times, that's why as a musician, I love them so much because there's so much to choose from. I do like bands. Again, I'm not knocking the Stones, but they just did the same thing. Great songs in there, though. God, there's some wonderful songs and great performances. But for me, if I had to pick the two, it's not because I dislike the Stones at all, but the fact that Beatles kept changing in their little 10-year fame period, that to me is just like unbelievable. As I say, I don't dislike the other bands. Like the Kinks are amazing, but there's something about that catalogue that you think, oh my God, it's mind-blowing, It
is utterly mind-blowing. What were your feelings on these new 50th anniversary 2019, 2020 mixes? I thought they were fantastic. I did speak to one guy who he's a classic guy where, if it's not the original mono on his 50s record deck,
fair enough.
It ain't shit. And so I said to him, what did you think of it? Oh, rubbish, hated it. They ruined Ringo's drums. He's a drummer, jazz drummer. Okay. And I thought that was really strange because I didn't think Ringo's drums had sounded better ever because they'd literally been with the process of going back to the master tape before they'd bounced everything down.
Absolutely.
They're using first generation tapes. And by that definition, they have more information. So there is more Ringo and there's nothing to hate there.
I agree. I mean, we went to Froome. I can't think how long ago it was. It's a while ago. We went to Rave. It's from the Grave, isn't it?
Yeah, Raves from the Grave.
When it used to be up the little side street, which I should know the name of, but I don't. And I think it's moved now. But
yeah.
And I nearly bought it on vinyl, but we wanted to hear it like really quick.
Yeah.
So we bought it for the car on CD. One of the versions. It wasn't a box set. It was there was like 25 versions or something.
Yeah.
And we put it in. And of course, I've known it since I was 12 years old. Helen's known it. She's a bit younger, but, for a while. And press play, the audience, the band are tuning up. and then that boom, boom, gat, gat, and his floor tom and his snare drum was just like, and I just went, yes. I think I was in traffic, and I was like, yes, at last we can hear how heavy Ringo was as a drummer. This is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the whole album, and I can't wait till they get to Revolver. Obviously, I keep piping on about Revolver, but I cannot wait. If there's a box set, I'll buy all of them, however many there are, because I just think that album is just that album to me. If you put like a few Kinks albums with it, and I'm trying to think what else. There's so many things in that '66 period. The Faces, there's some great stuff. You put that in a time capsule, and that basically, you go 40 years forward, and that was Britpop. They basically invented Britpop with the bands around them at the time. Yeah. The look with the hair, the glasses, the Oasis thing and all that, and the SG guitar and all that business in the Gibson casinos. Man, it was done. And the glasses, everything, it was done. Yeah. It's guys, you're going to do this slightly more modern, maybe some Moog bass and some more funky things, but this is kind of what you guys are going to be doing. And, from the minute you listen to Taxman, you think, jam. Yeah, all right, this is where we're going. You were right, guys. Yeah,
yeah. I had a moment with Abbey Road.
Oh yeah,
where I was.
That's great.
I was in Tesco, listening to it, and I was like, God, it's the first time I'd heard it, and I thought, I'll just put my headphones in, I'll just do my thing. And I remember I was reaching for some Strawberry Laces. And Golden Slumbers came on.
Oh, don't.
Oh, and there's that moment where he goes and he reaches and Paul goes for that rasp. Sorry, and he's like,
rasp.
And I was like, and I didn't know what to do with the emotion. It hit me like a train. I was like, oh my God. It was this moment of like, Jesus Christ. And I tell you what, I got home and thank God there was no one in the house. I got home and I played it again and again and again. Yeah. And for some reason, it was the Golden Slumbers in that new mix. It brought me to tears. And that's the first time I've ever cried listening to a piece of music. And I tell you what it was. It was because I thought to myself that George is gone, John is gone. Yeah. And they led such an incredible life. And I was just thinking about, now this is really sad, but you'll get it. I was thinking about, when Ringo goes or when Paul goes, they're going to be the only one left who knows what that was like to be that in that band. No one else has had that experience ever. And when the next Beatle goes, I think that the heartbreaking thing for me will be that there's one Beatle left who cannot relate to anyone else on the planet.
Exactly. And, I don't care how many books are written, how many documentaries you see, the love between the four of them. And I know there was hate for a while as well in the mid-70s and all they all suing their asses and all that. But, the thing that comes out of it is there was a massive love for each other. And I think, and again, I was thinking about this today as I was pottering about, like, as well as Prince and other stuff that we might talk about as well. But, I was thinking about what that would feel like, because it's like that thing with Buddy Rich, like that. Everyone says he was an asshole, he was this, he was that, but a lot of the time he didn't know why he was so good. He didn't know, because he would look at his other sort of compadres around him and they were good too, but he had this facility that was slightly, whether you liked his style doesn't matter, but his hands and feet were just like, faster and cleaner than Max Roach or any of them. Now, whether you like the style, as I say, is different. You might like Max's style more, and that's totally cool. But, like as a drummer, like Stuart Copeland always says, there's no one like him, and I think a lot of the time he was flippant and stuff because he didn't know what to do with it, because he was a bit like, Gene's had lessons, you've had lessons, Libby Belson's had lessons, all of you cats have had lessons, and I can just sit there and go, just do this stuff with very little lessons, because people say that's not true, but of course he didn't have many at all. Freddie Gruber gave him a handful, but a lot of it was just given. And I think Beatles were like that. They were like, well, why us? Like, we don't know why we were the first to play Shea Stadium. So all the haters, hate us, but we can't help it. We were there doing it first, and like John Lennon said, there was all the bands with us, but we were up in the crow's nest sailing the ship. We didn't want to be, but they kind of did, but we didn't expect we would end up there. So of course all this stuff came to them, and I don't think they knew what to do with it, and I don't think anyone does. I mean, stars now, bless them, sometimes flake out in their 20s or even check out, unfortunately, from this earth, And you're thinking those guys have taken all that with them, plus the burden, because it must be a bit of an albatross. Like, you're the best band in the world. They must be a bit like, well, okay, but like, are we? Like, we're just four guys. And I know some people, again, are like, oh, I hate it when they do that. Oh, we were just four guys. But I think I've seen enough things to believe that that's really how they feel. They're not going around going, yeah, we were the greatest, actually. And, they're not doing that. Especially as they get a lot older. There may be little moments where they were like, we were pretty good. But I think Ringo always says that. And Paul says, we were a great little band, weren't we? And all that. But yeah, imagine what it feels like to have that like huge weight on you. It must be really difficult.
Yeah.
And it's around you for all of your life. And if you're seen to dislike it, people will hate you. If you seem to go, yeah, it was pretty good, they'll hate you.
Yeah.
It's a really tough gig. Being a Beatles a tough gig, man.
I think Paul's handled it well. He's just ploughed on with his own thing. He's never gone. Well, I say he's never gone back to it. He continues to push forward with his own music, and I don't ever really feel like he just sits on the Beatles catalogue. And sort of like takes advantage of that. I just think he just carries on, and that's all you can do. He just tries to, forwards ever, backwards never, unless there's some money to be made in some reissues. But
well, it's like Jimmy Page, man. I mean, Jimmy Page is forever trying to reissue the Led Zeppelin catalogue, man. It's like, how many times can you remaster it? How many times can you dig something up that might be a rough edit of something and re-release it? Bless them. But yeah, I must say, McCartney 3, right, was bought for me. I didn't want it particularly, and I've actually enjoyed it. I've enjoyed listening to it, I have to say. Certain songs maybe not as much as others, but again, I've got. As I say, I was with some musician friends when I sort of opened it, and it was like, oh my God, I'm not sure if I'm going to like this when I drive home. But I drove home and it was like, yeah, man, track 6 especially.
There's a real rocker on there, isn't there? I can't remember what it's called.
This one's really long, actually. I don't know if it's that one, but this one's really long. And someone said, that Taylor Swift was interviewing McCartney and she'd heard the album and she went on in depth about this track. And the person I was talking to said, I've not heard it. What's it like? I said, actually, it was the one that really stood out because it's really modern. He's not trying to be anything, but it's a bit massive attacky in the sound, believe it or not. Yeah. But it doesn't sound like he's trying to do that. It just sounds like the song kind of just happened that way and he went with it, and it's almost like in a suite there's like movements and it changes and it goes back to where it started, and I didn't realize it was like 12 minutes long till I got to where I was going. I was like, oh my God, I really like that. So if you can still do that to someone who, as a Beatle, quite a picky Beatle fan of their solo stuff, if he can do that a few years on like he's done, then that's pretty good. I mean, the rest of it I could take or leave. There's some good moments, but that track was like, all right, you still got something going on. I'll give that to you.
I did hear on a podcast, I can't remember whose podcast it was, and it wasn't about the Beatles at all, but someone said it was about fame, and someone said, we're not evolved to handle fame. We haven't evolved so that everyone on the planet knows who we are.
Yeah.
Like, in our very neurological design, or however you'd say it.
Yeah.
We are not supposed to be Beatles.
Absolutely. And I think George, was an epitome of that, really. I mean, they all did their own thing in different ways. John with his protest thing was a really brave move as well for someone in the public eye to do what he did. And I saw a documentary on Sky Arts. Again, I sort of knew a little of it, but yeah, again, if you step back away from it all, which is so hard because of all the, the maelstrom of stuff that comes with the Beatles and all that business. But if you think about it, doing what he was doing in America was, especially then, was quite a scary thing. The amount of protesting he did when they were also asking him to leave and trying to get him out, but he didn't care. He was like, I'm still going to keep going. You're not going to stop me. I'm still going to go out on these marches and do these things, And I think there's something to be said for that. It's like, it's very easy now to step back. Oh, yeah, he was just trying with a good piece of chance. It's all a bit wimpy, isn't it? And all that. But again, think of how famous he was at that time and how much he had to lose. And he did. People took pee out of him, something chronic. But he still went forward and he still did it and he still believed in it. All right, later on he said it was a bit naive, but hey, he said I was young and I still believe in a lot of those things now. And I just think, especially now, it's so difficult now, forgetting the pandemic. I know that's a massive deal and it's such a sad thing for the world to go through. But let's try and think that if that never happened, I can't see many artists putting themselves on the line to be ridiculed quite as much, to be honest. When you're that famous, it's kind of like, yeah, respect. If you don't like him for his music, like him for that as a human being. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And of course, fame is what killed John in the end.
Yeah, exactly. That very thing. But people still go back to that Jesus quote, and maybe so. But I remember talking to my parents about it when I was a bit older, like maybe 15, 16. As I say, I've been a Beatles fan about 4 years by then. And I used to sort of nag them. What was it like? And they'd say, well, you'd wake up and in the papers they'd have arrived in Japan or they've arrived somewhere and it's always on the news. And it's like, oh, yeah, Beatles again. Or they've sold another million records, a squillion, billion records, and they're doing a stadium. Oh, how about that? And they said, we just got used to it. It was kind of like England with Carnaby Street, Michael Caine, we were leading the way in films and everything. It was just what was happening.
Yeah.
It was exciting. And I said, so about the Jesus thing, when I sort of read in some of the books, and they said, well, we remember it. There was a bit of a fuss, but nothing in England. But it was, of course, as we know, it was when they went to America, to the Bible Belt, they all went nuts. And, I think Chapman still says that there was many things because he thought he was Lennon and all that business, didn't he? But he does mention that quote, and I think that's probably a little bit of that in there. And it was a shame because all he was saying was, I mean, anyone could, J-Lo could say it now, or Beyonce, whatever could say this stuff now, and you go, yeah, you are actually, like even like the Kardashians or whatever they're called, Kardashians. I don't even watch that stuff, as you can tell, but one of them could say we're bigger than Jesus right now because we've got billions of people watching us all around the world. And it's a comment, and you could say, well, yeah, are these people going to church? No, most of them aren't because they like reality TV. Those things don't always go together. So yeah, you're right. You're actually probably a bit bigger than people who sit down on a pew every week to listen to a sermon. But of course, it was different then. It was a bit taboo, and
all John was saying was that with the youth of the world, we are bigger than Jesus, and he meant they are more popular than Christianity.
Yeah, that's all it was. He didn't say we're bigger or better, or we are Christ. They were just, and he was actually saying it as if to say it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That was his point. And seeing those interviews when he goes to America, he's so sheepish and, he gets so fed up of answering it. If you check those 1966 US tour interviews on YouTube, it's really interesting. Start with, he's very humble about it. But by the end, he said, look, I've said what I've said and it was wrong and it's been taken wrong. And, and now it's all this. And, I can only tell you so many times. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And for someone who was always kind of acerbic and a kind of bit like, on his feet, you could see he's like, really, I'm really sorry. Like I realize it's a step too far, but really, to be fair, he was right.
Yeah. He was correct. Right. What did you think of the Shea Stadium film, Hollywood Bowl?
Well, I've seen it a few times. I've not seen a remastered version, but I've seen the one they used to show on BBC Two all the time when at Christmas they had a Beatle fest and all the films would be on. Yeah. And the sound was dodgy. I mean, because they redid it, didn't they? And everyone knows they redid it. But it's a moment. It's a moment in rock history, and I think that it was documented. It had to be documented, and of course, it was shown a few months later in England anyway. Back in '66, it was shown or whatever after Christmas. I think it was shown the next year, and of course, they did it again in '66. But it's exciting. I mean, I wish it was the original sound, but I know the sound was rubbish because all the sound was rubbish.
Yeah,
those gigs back then, and the fact they had to redo it in London and then superimpose it is just a shame. But that's technology at the time.
Yeah, but there is a film that came out a few years ago.
Oh, I've not seen that. Actually,
they reissued. And they used modern tech to get the screaming out and draw the performances out.
Oh, wow, bloody hell. Right, okay. I know they did that to Hollywood Bowl, but I didn't know if they did that to Shea Stadium. But if they did...
Did I say Shea Stadium?
I think you did, or maybe I heard that.
Sorry, I meant Hollywood Bowl if I said that.
I've got the vinyl up there, the reissue one, but I've also got the original 78 one here somewhere.
I didn't know there was a Shea Stadium.
I prefer the old one.
What, the one that did in the 80s?
I prefer the 79 or 78 version of that album, whenever it came out, or 1980, yeah.
Right.
With the screaming. I love it. Because I bought the other one for Helen, and as I said, I've got it up there on the shelf. And it's good, it's very clear, but I prefer the other one. It just sounds more raw, sounds more exciting, but it's still good. I mean, God, to cancel out all those, 55,000 screaming kids or whatever it was, is quite a thing. But I still like the old one. And I've got the old one on CD in the car as well. I got it from Japan for like 35 quid or something, and it's just killer. I always say to people, listen to this. I remember I turned up at Nick Allen's studio out at Holt a couple of years ago, and I was playing with the band, and I knew some of the band members were more Stones people, and that's, as I say, that's totally cool, man. And I pulled up, and I was playing, I think it was Roll Over Beethoven, or it might have been Long Tall Sally, one of the rockers anyway.
Yeah.
And I pulled up, and I was like, listen to this. I had the window open. They said, who's that? And again, it was like, I said, this is the Beatles. They went, F off. I said, it is. They said, that's rocking. I said, yeah, I know. Come and listen, man. It was just like, oh, God. I think John, wishes that they could have been captured as they were. I mean, there are Cavern Club and there are Star Club tapes that are on record. I've got Star Club from 1962 in Germany, and they're really raw, but I think he wanted more people to be aware of that stuff rather than just how they were presented.
Yeah.
And I think as much as he knew they had to clean their image up, and Brian was right, he just wanted to be that loudmouth rocker in leather. He did.
Yeah.
And he always blamed Paul for the cleanup, but they were all part of it. And it is a shame they were never presented quite like that. But, what can you do?
I think the best representation of them that I know of in my collection is the Live at the BBC Volume 1.
Absolutely. That is good. You're right. I forgot that.
Captures that rock era quite well. But again, it's the BBC, so it's a little bit further down the road, isn't it? It's slightly more sterilised, maybe. But there's some... You can tell it's in there.
Yeah, definitely. But my favourite period, as I say, is 66, because 65 into 66, just into 67, because you could see they finally reached a point of like, we can't get any bigger. They've met Dylan, our music's evolving, and then all of a sudden you get Revolver. And you can just see they've grown up, the image is cool, they're really cool in their skin, they're very happy with everything. They've done everything by that point. They've been the biggest band in the world, done a stadium, no one else had done that, not even Elvis, and it's just like, right, here we are. Time to stop. And I just love that. It's like such confidence to say, now we stop. That's the end of that.
Yeah.
The circus is over. Now we're going to make some music. It's kind of not to such a big extent, but like Talk Talk did in the 80s. I mean, I know nowhere near as big, I know, but I love Talk Talk. And they did that. They did 2 or 3 years, really didn't like touring, maybe a bit more. And then Colour of Spring come out. They toured that. And then it was like, that's it. No more touring. I can't do this anymore. It's not how our music should be presented.
Right.
Boom. And then they make like Spirit of Eden and Laughingstock, 2 very non-commercial records, but all the musicians are like hailing them as some of the greatest albums of all time.
Yeah, I've been meaning to pick up Spirit of Eden.
You should do. I've got that here somewhere. And Laughingstock, the one after that, is even deeper than that. It's even more ethereal. But the records are they're just brilliant. I mean, Radiohead, all these different bands cite them as influences. And still, most people say, Talk Talk, who's that? And I get it. They were never massive, but the impact, Mark Hollis had, and the band, all of them, had on my age group and other age groups that listened to Radiohead and heard them talk about Talk Talk and gone, oh, Christ, yeah, these were good. Like, geez, why weren't they ever famous? It was just one of those things. And I think Parlophone even tried to sue them for the last album, saying there was no single on it, there's no commerciality. And they went to court over it. It's online, you can read about it. But Mark Hollis stood by his guns, man. He's like, no, this album has to come out. And of course, now it's cited as musical genius.
Right, yeah.
It's like a Silent Way or... not a British, but more like a Silent Way album, like Miles did. It's cited as one of those in the ethereal world, and rightly so, because they're stunning records, especially on vinyl, again. Definitely on vinyl.
Rob, I think we've done almost an hour on the Beatles.
Oh, sorry. We should have talked about other things. Let's talk about other things, man. Come on. Let's talk.
No. I don't want to move on just yet. I want to go on. I want to move on in a minute and talk about your whole life and career.
I'd forgotten about that.
and everything I've got written down here. But the Beatles chat is too good, and I could tell that you've been you've gone, oh, and you're in there. Let me
sorry.
No, it's fine. I loved it. No, I've been loving it.
I'm totally Beatles'd up, man.
Yeah,
anything that I'm really into, I will get into. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'm like
You got to dig me back out. That's the thing. That's why I said Prince a minute ago. Oh, anything, jazz, any drums, anything. Clive Stocker, anything. You know, get me out.
Talk to me about the Get Back movie. What do you think? Are you looking forward to it?
I'm really excited because you know what? I remember getting the Let It Be album when I was quite young, and I was in hospital, and my mum brought it to me on vinyl, and I was so excited. Or my Auntie James, one of them bought it for me. And I remember getting it home, and that was a real moment because it's my first operation. I was only maybe 13 or something. I remember playing it and liking it, but that always felt like there was something missing to me. Then I read a bit more as I got older about the troubles, the strife within the band, how Abbey Road was the album afterwards. It was a lot better and like a release and all that business. But there's something about that period that always, you know, kind of, I don't know what it was. It didn't confuse me. What did it do? I don't know. I just kind of mystified by that time because you think, hang on, Abbey Road came out and that was kind of the release. And before that was the White Album, so Tension. So you're thinking, and the Yellow Submarine album and all that, blah, blah, blah. And you think, oh my God, but the songs are killer and the sound's good. And of course, I didn't know they'd get back session afterwards without the choir on it and all that stuff. I just, as we all did, just knew the Phil Spector versions.
Yeah.
And I sort of fell in love with it, but at the same time, never felt connected to it, but still loved it. It's really, as you can tell, I can't really put it into words. And then I saw the film, because again, BBC used to show the films a lot. And it just...
Never seen the film.
Watching it. Right.
Never seen it.
There's some moments of humour, all their humour's there. But there's also the parts, you know, like with George saying, Paul, I'll play what you want, or I won't play anything if you don't want me to play, and all that. And it's a bit like, and everyone's sort of sat around like,
Yeah.
But it was, so that's a moment in time, a time capsule of that moment. So, of course, everyone thinks they didn't have a good time. And then I saw the first interview with, what's his name, the director? What's his
Peter
name?
Jackson.
Thank you. And he said, I'm really happy to say that I found all these hours of footage and they weren't as sort of pissed off and fed up as we all thought they were.
Right.
And then you see the clip and then he shoots the clip, you know, that's been out for a while, the sort of 5 minute or 4 minute clip, whatever. And they're having a great time and they're jamming in the studio. And I've got some bootlegs from that time on vinyl and they're rocking out. Actually, they're having fun in the studio amongst all the angst and the other stuff, but they're having fun. And you see the clips of John being a tit and everyone's being silly and having fun. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, maybe it wasn't as bad as the original film with Hogg or whatever. Not that it was his fault, he was just documenting something.
Yeah.
But it's not as heavy as Michael Lindsay Hogg, wasn't it? Maybe not as heavy as it seemed. And I'm glad because, as I said, there's been a little cloud over that album that I like to love it and also dislike it. But I'm fascinated because I love the songs in it and I love the production. Ringo's drums are great. I even like Phil Spector's versions of the whole thing, like Long and Winding Road. And there's some people who hate that, but I actually quite like it.
I don't.
When I hear the naked version, it just sounds naked to me. Yeah, it doesn't have the impact. It doesn't have the tear. But I know that's why people say, yeah, that's why it's naff. But for me, I like it.
Let It Be was my first favourite Beatles album, and I don't know if that was because it was one of the first I owned. You know, so
Maybe.
It was almost by default. But it's not. I don't think it's my favourite anymore, but I do still love it. But the naked version is great because once you've heard Long and Winding Road, naked, and then you've heard Long and Winding Road with the Phil Spector orchestration, it is very obvious that those initial stabs when they come in after Paul, they are a bit too loud in the mix. They are. Yeah. It's imperfect, but you know, it's been around so long now. It's accepted, isn't it?
It is. I'd like to have the box set actually one day, but I know they're expensive. But
what, for Let It Be?
Yeah, the original box set that it came in. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I liked the track, the revised track listing for Let It Be Naked. Don't Let Me Down is No one talks about that song.
That's an amazing song. Oh my God. And I know it was covered by a band it was a single, and again, some Beatle haters say, yeah, but they did it better than the Beatles. And I go, okay, fine, whatever, but isn't it a great song? Yeah. That's what we're talking about, right? And their version's so close to the original. It's like, anyway, Billy Preston's keyboards, man, it's a great blues tune. And what I like again about this period, and I didn't realise till later, which is again why I've got this thing about that Let It Be album, is because they were obviously listening to Cream. They were obviously listening to, the bands around Hendrix and stuff. They'd met these people. And it's obviously starting to seep into them.
And the band.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's all these things coming out, and you're thinking, but it still sounds like the Beatles, but you could tell they've been influenced. Like they've always said they were. They never tried to pretend they did it all themselves. They always said we're nicking from other people. Yeah. The same as they nick from us. Like we're happy to steal as well. And I just think they could turn their hands to these different things. Like, I Want You. I know this is Abbey Road now, but I Want You is sort of kind of creamy in places, and Fleetwood Mackie with Sun King, and it's a bit like, whoa, you're soaking these things in, man. You're really taking it on board. And to see where they would have gone, I know Jeff Lynne or John Lennon said they would have sounded like ELO later on. Maybe so, but I don't know. I think that raw edge would still have been there. Not that ELO can't play a rock tune. They can, of course they can, but I think they would have maybe not have had maybe the same kind of sound, but I guess he's not far off. They would have been a bit like that, but it just would have been nice to see where they would have gone to after Abbey Road, because that's such a great record to finish on. Yeah. Even though Let It Be is like the last one, whatever. But we all know Abbey Road. I mean, like you say, Golden Slumbers, and the rock carry that weight. The way it rocks out towards the end, it's just like they're just getting warm now. Like what's next? And it's like, no, that's it.
And that that last line about. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Exactly. It's like a fairy tale. Their story, I always say to people, it's like a fairy tale. It was like it was almost written out, and someone had to live it, and it just happened to be them. Yeah. It was always going to happen to somebody. But yeah, there's so many perfect moments, and like you say, that album, the way it's just so amazing, and then it ends with that, and in the end, the love we met. Oh, it's just like, really. What a lovely way just to say the end, like a Disney, the end comes up, and then the book closes. It's just like, it's too good to be true. And do you know what? Did you see that thing on Facebook the other day about people were starting to think that maybe the whole thing was like some sort of staged kind of thing to take us away from the black rights movements in the 60s and the JFK thing. And all that. So we're talking before they got to America. Right. That they just picked on something like the Beatles, say, right, people, let's make them this big thing. Let's make this thing happen to take our minds off of these other things. And I was kind of fascinated by that. It's kind of like, oh, it's a bit X-Files, but it's a bit like, well, they're a bit bloody good too, though. But okay, maybe somewhere. But then again, I've had that conversation with people online, and I'm like, I get it, but to be honest, the songs are too good. Like, and they didn't just appear. There's like a backstory. So I think in a way, the press were thankful of someone taking the weight off of a lot of troubles that were going on. That I do believe. Yeah. But thankfully, they were good enough to hold their own. So they didn't just disappear like a boy band or whatever. They held their own and kept going. But who knows? It's an interesting thing, like, ooh, okay. They're like this pandemic thing, conspiracy.
They were our biggest export for a while, weren't they? A band. Yeah. A band were our biggest economic offering to the world.
That's why they got their MBEs, apparently. It wasn't because those old farts in Parliament and stuff knew about the music. It wasn't about that and the Queen and that. It was just the fact that they'd been out making us money. Yeah. I think one of them says that. I think, it's one of those like BBC report things. They go out with a roving microphone like, what do you think of the Beatles? This guy's like, well, I think it's atrocious they're getting an MBE. They haven't fought in any wars. And maybe that's right, to be fair. And then, of course, they ask a young girl. She's like, oh, no, I think it's brilliant. They bring a lot of money into the country and that. And then they go to this another person who dislikes it, and it goes to this other guy. Of course, you're thinking, he's going to hate it. He goes, well, to be honest, they're fine young chaps, and to be honest with you, they're bringing a lot of money in the country, just like the Queen does, coming to the palace, and the Beatles are, and you just think, yeah, brilliant. But he was saying it then, like the whole world is Beatle mad, though they weren't, but you know what I mean? It seemed like they were, and Yeah, and no matter where I go in the world, I'm still very proud of England wherever I go. So when they talk about red buses or your Queen, and I go, yeah, my Queen, brilliant, yeah. Or Beatles, I'm like, yeah, I'm in there, like, yeah. And I'm just very proud of it. And it must have been for them back in the day when travel, like international travel, was only for rich people. It must have been amazing for them to go around the world and just say, we've done that, we've done this, we've done that. It must have been quite an amazing feat for them. Full, reasonably ordinary guys. I mean, I know they weren't completely working class, but somewhere in between Ringo was. I know he was. People always say he was the most working class, but so it's not like rags to riches completely because they had reasonably good lifestyles. But yeah, but still, what a story! Like,
yeah.
It's like
I heard a story with Ringo, and I want to talk about Ringo's drum sound in a second. I heard a story with Ringo that he used to, inside his lapels, in his Teddy Boy days, used to sew in razor blades as underneath the lapels. So when the gangs came and grabbed you by the scruff of the neck, they'd slice their fingers. And I was like, that's Ringo Starr, the voice of Thomas the Tank and, Yellow Submarine. And
Ringo Slasher. Well, it's like that program that everyone watches, Peaky Blinders, man. It's that whole thing. People had all these little tricks and stuff. It's a bit scary, but I think the pool, as they say back in the day, I think where he was living, because we did the Beatles tour, where he was living is still renowned for being, quite a hard place.
Right.
And all the streets where he lives, I don't know if you've done this Beatle tour, it's amazing. We took a taxi. So it's just us. You could do the magical mystery thing, but you can't stop anywhere any longer. You can't go for a pee or anything. When you get in a taxi, you can say, I need to stop here for something, and you can do it. It's a bit more moolah, obviously, but it was worth it. And this one guy took us to where Ringo lived, and of course it's all covered in "We Love You, Ringo" stuff. But the whole street, there's 2 or 3 streets all boarded up, and it's actually where they film Peaky Blinders. When you see those street scenes,
right,
they film it there. And it's just all boarded up. And the taxi driver said, even now, he said, you don't really want to be around here at night, to be honest,
Right.
And it's like, whoa. But I think he had a really rough time of it, Ringo, more than the others. I mean, I know Paul lost his mum, and it's all rough in different ways. Of course it is.
Yeah.
But I think, where Ringo was very much like salt of the earth, We were talking like quite a tough time for him as a young man growing up in that period. And the other guys were going to a technical college and all that. And of course, he didn't have any education really. Not really, because he was ill a lot of the time. So he missed on a lot of schooling because he was so poorly. He had really bad health when he was a kid. So he missed out on a lot of the stuff that the others got up to. But I think he still added to the whole, because you got John with his art and his play with words, which I love. You got Paul with his music and again play on words, and George the quiet one but very confident, and then Ringo just seems to be like, I'm just here, but he kind of took that on. and unfortunately that thing like Keith Moon is the animal and all that, but like Keith Moon said, Ringo was the original animal, but people get these sort of typecast things, don't they? These what's the word I'm looking for, but and Ringo kind of was that in the band, I think. And there's John, Paul, George, and Ringo on the drums, But he was much more than that, as I'm sure you're about to go into now. He was much more than that.
I mean, I thoroughly stood when like I said, I was on that podcast a few weeks ago, and I was thoroughly in defence of all things Ringo. But what I wanted to talk about was Levon Helm, his drum sound, and that Ringo had said to him, "I want that drum sound, and I don't know how you get it." And I don't know if you can explain it to us what that drum sound is. It's there's something about his kick and his snare.
Yeah,
that's very.
It's placement, it's touch.
Right.
Those two things I think are key. Technique, of course, is important, but neither of those drummers had a mass of technique to throw out. So the band couldn't suddenly stop and say, right, Levon Helm's going to play a 10-minute drum solo, or Ringo Starr's going to play a 10-minute drum solo. It's the Shea Stadium girls, we're off to the bar. That's not going to happen. They weren't those sort of drummers. They'd been through, backing singers. Now it's going to sound, here we go, but it's not really around now, and it's a real shame. But we're getting it in other ways, of course. But back then, those drummers would be employed to play like in a club, let's say, for instance, there'd be the backing band. So you might have Ollie on the organ and they'd have to play with him for half an hour. Then they'd get someone who's going to come out and do a swing set. So they'd play this sort of like very sort of stiff swing or whatever. And then someone would come out and play more rock and roll. So they had to play all of these different things. And they were listening to all of these different things. And they were pulling it off to a certain degree with very limited technique. If you listen to that Star Club stuff, they had to back up all kinds of people, mostly rock and rollers to be fair, but still they'd be playing all different feels, 12/8, swing, shuffle, brushes. And those kind of things are lost now because most people say that's old people's music. I'm not playing that. But when you were that age of 16, 17 back then, you got a chance to gig for the money and the girls, you went out and did it, and I think those drummers had all that experience in clubland that when they landed bands, literally, and the Beatles that were going to do something with the right people out the front, all of a sudden they could bring all of that wealth of knowledge into their playing. The same as, John and Paul brought all of the show tunes into what they did so they could write tunes like Honey Pie as well as like rockers and stuff. It's just that experience. And I think both Levon and Ringo, of course, there were no click tracks back in the day. They were the click track, as Ringo always says, I'm the click track. So they were the engine room. So they were only as good as the people around them, I think. And you've got to hold your own sometimes and play through if someone's not doing their thing. But again, those two drummers landed with musicians that were totally doing the right thing. And it was like hand in glove. All of a sudden, they're playing what's right for the song. And it's just inherently within them. There's no kind of thought about it. You don't think about, this is a crotchet groove, this is going to be a quaver groove, this is a trip. You just play what needs to be played for that song. And there's like an inner knowledge which they had, and a love of dynamics, know when to come out of the stocks playing loud, know when to stay in. And I just think some of that, I spend so much time, as you may know, like doing drum stuff and clinics and drum chats and all that, and I love it all, and it's a technique is everything. I would never say to someone, don't get a teacher or throw away the drum books. They're there for a really good reason, but there's also this sort of grey area where some people come along and like that, those drummers, and they just got this feel that you can't learn, So no matter how fast you could play a paradiddle or your double pedals or whatever you can do well, or jungle or whatever, drum and bass and all that, it doesn't matter, or blast beat. This is a different thing, and you can't quantify it.
Yeah.
And it's alive in all musicians, but we like to go back to these drummers because, to be honest with you, when I'm in the studio, I've said this many times, but when I'm working with singer-songwriters, it depends on their genre, of course, but a name that comes up a lot is Ringo, and actually Levon, but Ringo a bit more. But they're both the same kind of drummer, and Jim Keltner. They're the same kind of cats, as they say. And they'll say, can you give me that Ringo thing on this song? And I'm thinking, well, this style isn't really that. Yeah, but I want that lazy backbeat, which comes to the next thing I was going to say about placement, because these guys don't play to click. They never did. They play by feel and by what they're hearing and responding, like jazz musicians did. All right, they're not technically like, on the ball as a jazz player, but hey, they've got the feel of a jazz player because they're moving with the music. When it's exciting, they're pushing that music. When they want to bring it back, they're bringing it back, and they're just holding it. All of those jobs, you as a teacher myself and lecturer, you can't teach that. You can to a certain degree, but you've either got it or you haven't. And these people, and it's rare. I haven't got it all the time. No one has. But these guys just seem to have it, and they were in the right gig for it. So, we could say our beat is there, and that's fine. We're on it, boom, boom, ka, boom, 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 ka. But they just had this idea of playing behind the beat before it was even a thing. Yeah. So if there was a click, they'd be slightly flamming it because they'd be slightly in front or behind, whatever they wanted to do. Yeah. And that's a thing that when people say, give me that Ringo thing, and I go, what do you mean? They go, well, not necessarily the sound, but that thing that you're just holding back, that Plastic Ono Band feel that you're just going to lose it, but you're just behind me, but just enough. Yeah. And that's hard. Because then you got to do it to a click, which they never had to do. Yeah. But it's really hard. But that is the thing. So as I say, for people that, haters is a strong word, but people who don't get it, that's what these guys do. They're not going to say, as I say, drum solo. That isn't what they're employed for. They never were. And then there's the touch as well. They just got a certain way of tuning. Of course, the engineers have got a certain way of making them sound like they sound. That's obviously very true as well. But it's still men and women, whoever we talk about, with bits of wood in their hands, turning them around, playing on a drum kit.
Yeah.
It's about that, and everyone does it differently. That's a wonderful thing about music. But certain people like that will always raise their heads above the parapet because it's just such a rare thing. And I work a lot in the studio, man. And I tell you, of all the drummers, Steve Gadd, there's some amazing drummers you could reference, from all different eras and genres. But Ringo is one that comes up a lot,
right?
Hell of a lot. And I'm just so glad that I understand what it's about.
Yeah.
Because if you turn around to that performer and said, "Oh man, the Beatles suck," and Ringo, man, I mean, what's that doing to your session? That's immediately killing the vibe and probably killing your job. That isn't what this is about. And again, people have asked me to do things from drummers and bands that I've maybe not personally like or know much about, but by the time I've left the studio, I've learned something about me and about a different band and drummer that I think, actually, that's really cool. I'm going to go home, get on eBay and buy an album or Amazon and buy the vinyl or whatever. And that's a good thing. But that's what those drummers are about. That's the magic that Phil Collins has got it too. There's so many we could mention. We could have a whole show just on.
Oh, dude,
I've
just come out of a Phil Collins hole. Big thank you to Robert Bryan, who was my guest this week on the Giant Pod. This was part 2 of a 2-part special with Rob. So if you haven't heard part 1, then make sure you go and check that one out. We're not going to do the usual jargon at the end of this because it's in the end of part 1. So if you want to know more about Rob, you want to hear more stories about Rob, you want to hear some stuff that he's played on, head over to part 1 of the podcast. It's all in there for you. Big shout out to Harry Williams for producing 2 podcasts this week. We will see you next week on the Giant Pod. Thanks very much.